Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavad-gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhakti-Vedanta Swami Prabhupada, Chapter 12, Text 10. Abhyasepya samarthosi mat karma paramo bhava madartham api karmani kurvan siddhim avapsyasi. Translation, Krishna says, if you cannot practice the regulations of Bhakti Yoga, then just try to work for me, because by working for me, you will come to the perfect stage. Purport. One who is not able even to practice the regulated principles of Bhakti Yoga, under the guidance of a spiritual master, can still be drawn to this perfectional stage by working for the Supreme Lord. How to do this work has already been explained in the 55th verse of the 11th chapter. One should be sympathetic to the propagation of Krishna consciousness. There are many devotees who are engaged in the propagation of Krishna consciousness, and they require help. So, even if one cannot directly practice the regulated principles of Bhakti Yoga, he can try to help such work. Every endeavor requires land, capital, organization, and labor. Just as in business, one requires a place to stay, some capital to use, some labor, and some organization to expand, so the same is required in the service of Krishna. The only difference is that in materialism, one works for sense gratification. The same work, however, can be performed for the satisfaction of Krishna, and that is spiritual activity. If one has sufficient money, he can help in building an office or temple for propagating Krishna consciousness, or he can help with publications. There are various fields of activity, and one should be interested in such activities. If one cannot sacrifice the results of his activities, the same person can still sacrifice some percentage to propagate Krishna consciousness. This voluntary service to the cause of Krishna consciousness will help one rise to a higher state of love for God, whereupon one becomes perfect. The first time I read this purport, and subsequently also other times I read, I was struck at Srila Prabhupada's very practical intelligence. Actually, the whole Bhagavad-gita it's very practical. There is a term in English, otherworldly, which refers to people who are so spiritual that they have no connection with this world. They're just, then they don't really know how to operate, or they have no interest in this world. But Srila Prabhupada was very this worldly while directing us to that world. Parastasmatu bhavanyo vyakto vyaktat sadatanaha yassa sarveshu bhuteshu nashyatsu navinashyati. Krishna, while giving Arjuna practical direction, don't be otherworldly, you're in this world, don't try and renounce it, live in it, follow my order, fight. That was Krishna's direction to Arjuna. And by doing that, you will attain perfection. Siddhim, the word used here is siddhim. The perfection is to be Krishna conscious. So Srila Prabhupada was very cognizant of this world. I was just listening to Srila Prabhupada's question and answer session in Hyderabad after public lecture there. And you can imagine Hyderabad at that time. Maybe you can't imagine. I don't know. many persons who are well educated and knowledgeable of Vedanta's philosophy in some way or other. So much so, I remember reading in the, I think it was maybe the Deccan Herald or some paper down there, that in the course of some writing, maybe some editorial, they cited Singhavalokanyai without any explanation. In other words, the readers were supposed to understand what that means. Do any of you understand what it means? Anyone? Singha means lion, and avalokan means looking. So this is used in various ways to... one way is that lion, when he walks through the jungle, he sometimes looks back this way and that to look all around and see. So this may be used in literary exegesis. You know the word exegesis means analysis, particularly of scripture. That while one develops the argument that he's making, he may refer back to points that are already made to help the reader or the hearer keep the track. So that's one way it's used. There are other ways of using it also. But anyway, you can imagine in Hyderabad, I believe it was 1974 or was it 75, Srila Prabhupada had a big Pandal series in Hyderabad. 75, was it? I can't remember. I thought you might know, but you were at that time you were still based in Delhi, you know. So the first question that comes up, a very good question actually. Man took quite some time to ask it, and Srila Prabhupada listened. Basically the question is that, well, the Vedanta Sutras are there, and Shankara says one thing, he says the Brahma Satya Jagan Mithya, and then Ramanuja comes along and says something else, and Madhva says the world is Satya, and how can we know? Actually, so Srila Prabhupada, he gave an elaborate explanation. Quite elaborate explanation, and then he summed it up by saying that anyway, these points are very detailed, and we don't have time to get into it, but it's, I mean, very just hair-raising how Srila Prabhupada just gave all the points one by one briefly. One of the points he gave is that we have to use our common sense also. Practice, Prabhupada, you have to be practical. Apart from the Acharya's commentaries, you have to think yourself, he gave several examples, if Brahma is Satya, then how does anything he create become Mithya? And if we're in this world, we have to live in this world and go to the Satya. So Prabhupada gave very practical explanations, and in the practical, in living in this world, Srila Prabhupada was very practical. He was a bhakti yogi, and Prabhupada in this answer he also gave this example of the of Hari Sambandha. Well, the Mayavadi Prapanchakataya Buddhya Hari Sambandha Vastuni Parityago Mumukshabi Parityago Vairagyam Falgu Katyate. How the non-devotees, they renounce this world thinking it to be false, and Prabhupada said that it's not the world is false, but your renunciation is false. And then anasaktasya vishayan yataham upayanjataha nibandha Krishna sambandha yuktam vairagyam uchyate. To live in this world not being attached to it, but utilizing everything in Krishna's service, that is proper detachment. So Srila Prabhupada exhibited this by his being completely tuned in to everything around, but being very aware of everything around and how to use everything in Krishna's service. As is mentioned, you may wonder why Prabhupada writes that every endeavor requires land, capital, organization, and labor. You might think you're reading from some economics book. Instead of Bhagavad-gita is spiritual, but yes, but Bhagavad-gita is giving us direction how to live and work in this world so that we can come out of it. So Srila Prabhupada is not writing a treatise on economics, but he's giving this example to illustrate the point that we have to live we can work for Krishna. That means we work according to the ways of the world, and we have to be aware of that. And clearly Srila Prabhupada was very aware of that. Sometimes Srila Prabhupada, maybe once it's recorded that he said this, that sometimes his godbrothers, or maybe it was Achyutananda often brought such statements to Srila Prabhupada because he had a lot of association with Srila Prabhupada's godbrothers. He brought the point to Srila Prabhupada. Some of your godbrothers say that you were successful in preaching in the West because you're a good businessman, you know how to do things. And Srila Prabhupada said, yeah, it's also a factor. You can be an ecstatic. An ecstatic means someone who is ecstatic. But for practical activities in this world, someone has to organize it. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was an ecstatic, but he also sent people here and there and gave them specific tasks to do. Nityananda, you preach in Bengal. Rup, Sanatan, Lokanath, he sent them to Vrindavan, and he gave them specific tasks to do. You find out the lost holy places of Vrindavan. You write books, and he gave them direction. I read recently some scholar of Gauriya Vaishnava, Westerner, Dimuk. He wrote that Chaitanya was no theologian. What? You didn't read Chaitanya. He's translated Chaitanya Charitamrita, but the chapters and chapters of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu explaining devotional service, the opulence of Krishna, all very philosophical, theological. I didn't read more, but I don't know. Anyway, there's no need. But just Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was practical also. He manifested that through others. Jiva Goswami, among the many things that he wrote, he also wrote a will. Very practical thing to do. It's written in Persian. There's a little bit at the end added later, that's called a codicil. That was added later in Sanskrit, written in Bengali script, saying that all the sevas that I'm doing, because what did he have? He was Kanta, what is that? Kopina Kanta Ashrit. He didn't have many material possessions, but he had the right of service of Radha. Damodar was under his jurisdiction. So he gave that service to a certain of his disciples, and he made. So he was very practical. He wrote a will also, and he had witnesses. One of them was Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, among others. So very practical. In another conversation, Srila Prabhupada was talking with Tamal Krishna Maharaj, I believe it was, about how Chaitanya Mahaprabhu preached to Sanatan Goswami. Sanatan Goswami was a very practical person, he was so practical, had such good practical intelligence, that he was made what we would nowadays call the Prime Minister, and Pradhan Mantri. It's actually, Prime Minister doesn't mean the first position, it means the Chief Advisor, actually. That term came out of English, because originally the Prime Minister was the Chief Advisor to the King. And the King had the power. But eventually the kings became reduced in power, and the Prime Minister was left with all the power. So he was the Pradhan Mantri. He was such a good Prime Minister that even he wanted to leave, and the king wouldn't let him go. So he used his expertise in worldly affairs to get free. So Srila Prabhupada said, yes, you see, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he brought such people, and then what they could do. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was living in Puri But he had his ministers preparing the work for the Sampradaya on Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's order, Lupta Tirtha Udha, finding out the lost holy places of Vrindavan, and not just finding them out, but re-establishing them, as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself had did the first one, Radha Kund and Shama Kund, and writing many books, training disciples. So Srila Prabhupada said then that, so you also find one Sanatana Goswami, you preach and make people like that, bring them to the Krishna conscious movement. They can do so many things. So Srila Prabhupada is a very practical intelligence. I thought to speak on this verse today with this particular purport, in which Srila Prabhupada talks, just touches the subject of practical activity in this world, and he says that has to be engaged in the service of Krishna. He gives some examples. Srila Prabhupada writes, if one has sufficient money, he can help in building an office or temple for propagating Krishna consciousness. Note that he puts office before temple. Interesting, isn't it? He puts office or temple. And actually at one point Srila Prabhupada said, we don't need any more temples, but you can make Bhaktivedanta libraries and invite people to come and read the books. Anyway, it's very practical intelligence. I wanted to speak on this because a few weeks ago a godbrother has sent me an email outlining a conversation he had had with another godbrother of ours, who is a highly revered devotee in our movement, very peaceful and very sattvic by nature, and very intelligent materially also. So this godbrother who wrote to me described how in the course of conversation with this other godbrother, he'd raised the topic of Srila Prabhupada wanting farm projects, to which the very intelligent godbrother replied that he felt that Srila Prabhupada was a visionary, or an idealist, and that he didn't really have so much practical idea. So it's the same thing we've been unfortunately hearing for many years, that Srila Prabhupada, well, we can accept his spiritual guidance but not his material guidance. So this very intelligent devotee said that actually Prabhupada's ideas of rural life were adopted from Mahatma Gandhi. So it's nothing really that very spiritual. The implication is that it's not very spiritual or not very authoritative. Now, Gandhi, he used the phrase simple living and high thinking, and he is famous for his chakar, his spinning wheel. He had a daily vow to do so many rounds every day of spinning his wheel for making cotton, not the rounds that we chant. So he was fixed in his rounds. Wherever he was, he might have to address a big meeting or in prison or wherever he was, he would do his rounds every day to demonstrate the point of local level self-sufficiency. This is, we don't need industries and factories. We can do everything at the local level. That was Gandhi by his spinning wheel, which made it onto the flag of the Republic of India, and I suppose that's still taught in the schools why it's there. Is it? Not taught? No. Gandhi became completely buried ideologically. But you know that on the flag of India there's a wheel. Oh, that might be taken as Ashok's wheel also, is it? Uh-huh. Okay. I'd heard that it was supposed to symbolize Gandhi's spinning wheel also, but anyway, they don't follow either Ashok non-violent. Well, Nehru had some ideas of non-violence, but it's not practical. He invaded Goa also. Well, anyway, let's not get into that too much. So, all right, Gandhi said some things that Srila Prabhupada also said. That it doesn't mean that the origin of this is Gandhi. Gandhi didn't invent farming or village life. As Srila Prabhupada often pointed out, Krishna is well, in one specific conversation, again this was with Tamal Krishna Maharaj, Tamal Krishna Maharaj said to Srila Prabhupada that, Srila Prabhupada, you are the farm acharya. And Srila Prabhupada said, no, I'm not. Krishna is. Krishna and Balaram. Krishna has a flute. Why does he have a flute? What's the answer? To call the gopis? No. It's to call the cows. Well, he calls the gopis. Well, whether it's to call the gopis or call the cows that may be a point of contention, but as far as the obvious reason, it's for the cows. That's how the cows know where. The cows may wander here and there, and the cowherd boys play the flute, and then they know where he is. So that he's doing the Goraksha, and Balaram with the plow is doing Krishi. So Krishna and Balaram are Srila Prabhupada said, they are the farm acharyas. Not me. Prabhupada said, not my idea. It's Krishna's idea. It's not Gandhi's idea either. To Gandhi's credit that he wanted to promote that. But definitely Srila Prabhupada differed on many issues, in many ways, from Mahatma Gandhi. So, even if you say he got it from Gandhi, then he was very discriminating in what he took, and he would take things if they're in consonance with Krishna conscious philosophy. Just like this statement here that every endeavor requires land, capital, organization, and labor. Quite possibly, Srila Prabhupada learned that in his economics class. He would often quote Marshall's economic law that family life, sexual attraction is that's what gets the economy going. Material desire, and especially family life, because a man may be content to live very simply, but generally the wife, I said that yesterday, stri, the word stri, woman, that comes from the same root as vistar, that which expands. So Srila Prabhupada often quote that. So quite possibly he took this statement of land, capital, organization, and labor from his economics class. But that some non-devotees have some apt insights into the nature of this material world doesn't mean that we reject everything. They say if they have some good insight, we can take it, but we have to see whether it's good according to Shastra and common sense. We have to be a little careful with common sense because it's often not that sensible. So this idea that Srila Prabhupada was just a visionary and idealist, and we don't really have to accept what he says, even if he says that establishing Varnashram is 50% of my mission, and that's a major statement, which we have to take very seriously. The idea that I don't know where this idea came from, that Srila Prabhupada is impractical. How did he start he himself noted that he started a worldwide organization with 40 rupees, and in 12 years he had made a multi-crore enterprise all over the world. And actually those 40 rupees, he never spent them either, the original 40 rupees, because he couldn't change them into dollars in America. So he said, you see, what businessman can do that? Of course, Srila Prabhupada didn't approach it as a business, but in some ways he did, because he was very practical. He registered the International Society for Krishna Consciousness when there was in New York City in 1966, when there was no need to do so, at the stage that the organization was at. It wasn't an organization. It was Prabhupada and Brahmananda and a few others, and a storefront which was rented, and they used to come around and sing and dance and take some food, and it was spiritual, as far as they understood. But this purposes and income tax, you can get income tax relief. Who's going for giving a donation? Who's going to give a donation? You know, people put 20 cents in the basket after the kirtan, but you're not going to give a tax rebate on that. But Srila Prabhupada had it all planned out. He was very practical in so many ways. When a proposal, in one letter, a proposal came from London to purchase a church, and Srila Prabhupada wrote back that make sure there's enough parking space in the vicinity. So, even today in India, they're just beginning to catch on to the idea that we need parking space. But it's really not, and it definitely wasn't part of Indian life at that time, and it still isn't to a large extent. It's coming gradually. But it was a very practical consideration, isn't it? Prabhupada, he's from India. How does he know about parking lots? How does he know? Because he wherever he went, he tuned into what he was doing, and very practical too. And it must be that he was very practically tuned in to see what are the needs in various situations, what has to be done. So very practical consideration also. So we should be very careful. We may be very intelligent and have the idea that we can judge and put Srila Prabhupada into some kind of box and box him up and understand him in our own way. Intelligence can be, Srila Prabhupada said, we want a devotee like Sanatana Goswami, very intelligent, very practical. You have to be very careful also. Simplicity. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said, simplicity is the main characteristic of a Vaishnava. So simplicity, this term, it has various meanings. One meaning is to be somewhat foolish, naive, easily cheated, or not very intelligent. That's one meaning. Another meaning is one is very simple in one's habits, not much interested in money and razzmatazz and a big show of opulence. That's enough. To live very simply. But the main meaning here, to say that simplicity is the hallmark of a Vaishnava, means not having very complicated mental processes, but simply accept Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Complicated mental processes means philosophically that might be there. And in fact, our previous acharyas, they got very deeply into philosophy, just as that man was asking about the commentaries on the Vedanta Sutta of Ramanuja and Madhva. Undoubtedly, they had a very sophisticated intellectual life, but simple in the sense that yes, we accept Krishna without doubting. Yo mameva samuro janati purushotamam sasarva vidbhajati mam sarva bhavena bharata. Krishna says, the one who accepts me as the Supreme Personality of Godhead without doubting, he knows everything in all respects. Shraddha Shabde Vishwas Kohe Sudrida Nishchoy Krishna Bhakti Koile Sharva Kama Krita. This isn't a definition of faith, to have the faith that if we simply serve Krishna, we don't need to do anything else. Mamekam Sharanam Raja. Just surrender to Krishna. We don't need to do anything else. Not only don't not need to do anything else, there's no point in doing anything else. We won't do anything else. We'll only serve Krishna. So that's simplicity. So similarly with Srila Prabhupada, with Krishna, with anyone or anything, if we come to the platform of doubting, then the doubts can go on endlessly. I was just thinking, because you told me yesterday that there's this latest scientific speculation that actually the world is flat. So anyway, we hear things like that from time to time. Some time ago I saw some scientist said that actually the blood in our veins flows in both directions at the same time. It's amazing the things that they can come out with. Which is why I said also yesterday, I don't trust anything the scientists say. If they say that, okay, acid and alkali reacts to form salt and water, okay, all right. But when they talk about black holes and dark matter and dark energy, I'm somewhat... So anyway, I thought about that, and I thought that, well, maybe there'll be a great breakthrough, and then the whole world will come to realize that what Srila Prabhupada is saying and what Shastra is saying about science is right. But I thought, no, there's never going to be a time when you can fully defeat science any more than you can fully defeat Mayavad, because there'll always be someone who gets energy and intelligence from Maya to oppose your theory, and they see the world in a different way. They'll just, it's nahang prakasha sarvasya yoga maya samavrita murho yang nabhijanati loko mama jamavyayam. There are always going to be people who, even if you present all good reasons to be Krishna conscious, they won't. Matirna Krishna parata, and you know the verse, I hope. There are people who are determined not to be Krishna conscious, and Krishna will give them the intelligence not to do, to be non-Krishna conscious. So, with doubt, there's no end to it. You can make a perfectly good case for it, and you can always present some doubt. The process of doubt goes on ad infinitum. With all due respect to Moswa Descartes, who finally found something he believed in. I believe in myself. I think, therefore I am. But then he already started with I, which presumes his existence. So this I think, therefore I am has also been ripped to shreds by other philosophers. And again, Srila Prabhupada answering this query about the Vedanta Sutras. Srila Prabhupada queried, Nasang Rishya Yasya Matang Na Bhinnam. Everyone's got a different theory. You can't be considered a saintly person unless you have a different theory. But, my dear friends, I warn you, don't be so intelligent as to question Srila Prabhupada's veracity. That doesn't mean we should be blind followers, but we should have the faith that Srila Prabhupada is a perfect representative of Krishna, who's going to carry us to Krishna. We have to put our faith in something. If we don't put our faith in Krishna, then we say you don't put our faith in anything. We put faith in our own mind. It's a very bad thing to put our faith in. So I've come to the position where I don't have faith in anything. But then that means you have faith in not having faith in anything. It means you have faith in your own judgment. You have to put your faith somewhere. And we can't know everything. We can't understand everything. So leap of faith. Make the leap of faith. Find a perfect person. This was Srila Prabhupada always made the point. When you have perfect knowledge, you have to go to a perfect person. And the next question comes, how do you know a perfect person? Then you can go on forever and ever and ever, but at least we accept. Brahmanda Brahmite Kono Bhagyavan Jeev Guru Krishna Prasadi Pai Bhakti Lata Beach. And again in this answer regarding the Vedanta Sutras, as Prabhupada said about the Parampara system, we accept Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and then he said, and also common sense. So all different points he said. So there are various methods. It's a big topic which you, Gokul Chandra, started to get into at one point, the point of Praman Tattva, how to understand. But there's no end to it. The epistemology is the English term. How to understand everything. If you get into it, you can go on your whole life researching it, and there's no end. But you can never come to a clear, because that's the nature of the mind and the nature of reality. It's beyond our ability to understand everything completely and perfectly. So we have to put our faith somewhere. But see also, I won't get into so many arguments just now, but what Krishna states in Bhagavad-gita is, we have to assert it's the best teaching, it's the best philosophy. And Srila Prabhupada has perfectly expounded that. In some areas we may get into more detail, and Srila Prabhupada gave that directive, for instance, to the followers of his who were scientists. As Srila Prabhupada said, I've described in an outline way, and now you get into detail and discuss about science. So, but the basic point, yo mam eva samudho janati purushottamam sasarva vidbhajate mam sarva bhavena bharata. If we have faith in Krishna as the Supreme Personality of God, then we come to know everything. What does that mean? We're tiny jivas. What can we know about anything? But Krishna gives us the intelligence by which we can understand. And if we want to make some comparisons, then just like, for instance, why chant Hare Krishna? Why not be a Muslim? Well, I guess for most of you coming from a Hindu background, the question wouldn't arise. And myself coming from a Christian background wouldn't arise. But then just from a neutral point of view, philosophy is very weak, and practice is a heavy element of tamagun in there with animal slaughter. Again in that question, it's just amazing questions and answers session. Srila Prabhupada was asked by someone, your movement should stop cow slaughter. Prabhupada said, we're teaching no meat eating, then there'll be no cow slaughter. Why don't you want to stop the goat slaughter? We're also stopping goat slaughter. Why are you only interested in cow slaughter? Stop meat eating and then there'll be none of this slaughter. So anyway, we don't want to get into a whole big thing now. But really, there is... it's not very difficult to understand that there is nothing better than this, both theoretically and practically. Pratyakshavagaman dharmyam susukam kartamavyam. We can practically experience that. So, I just follow Srila Prabhupada, that's all. It's not accept what he says. Now, of course, most of our devotees, they're not on such a big PhD intelligence level that they're analyzing every word of Srila Prabhupada and trying to find, can I really believe it? Most of our devotees, what is that? Indriyani prani ahur indriyebhya parang manaha manasastu bara buddhi yo buddhi paratastu sa. Most of us, at least I can speak for myself, the sensual level, all big philosophy, but meanwhile, just trying to control the senses and the mind. And then if we control the senses and the mind, then there's the next. You didn't reach there yet. There's still the intelligence. Now we can get you. But we see practically those who apply their vast intelligence to analyze in great detail all the statements of Bhagavad-gita and realize that actually it's just some Hindu mythology and what happens? They fall down to the sensual platform. They fall down from devotional service. Ashadadhana purusha dharmasyasya parantapa aprapya mang nevartante mrityu Mityu Sangsara Sagara. Mityu Sangsara Vartmani. They fall down. They remain in the world of birth and death. So don't be over-intelligent. Keep on reading these books, living these books, distributing these books. And it's an almost verifiable fact, although you can't really verify empirically, but almost verifiable fact that devotees who follow Srila Prabhupada, they go back to Godhead. There are many cases we've seen devotees passing away in circumstances which show that if at all we accept Bhagavad-gita, and if we don't, then what are we doing here anyway? That they're going to Krishna. And it's highly verifiable that those who follow Srila Prabhupada become saintly persons, advanced in spiritual knowledge. That means they may not have vast knowledge of all the commentaries on the Vedanta Sutras, but in practical life they live the life of Krishna consciousness, not being attached to this world. It's all verifiable. So let us stick to this process. Don't be such a fool as to put our faith in our own intelligence. Someone might be very intelligent, that they can have a PhD and all, but if you actually put faith in your own intelligence, that's extremely unintelligent. It's an incredibly stupid thing to do when you think that we're just tiny little beings. We don't know how we got here. We don't know who we are, where we come from, where we're going to. We're something. We thought we were on a ball floating in space, but now we're told it's a flat saucer. And we're just here for a short time, and we can't control our mind and our sense. And we think, "Oh, I'm very intelligent. It's incredibly stupid to put our faith in our own. To call it pea-brain. Pea is something small, but it's subatomic intelligence, subatomic size intelligence. Better submit our intelligence at the lotus feet of Krishna via the parampara system. This is called buddhi yoga, to join our intelligence with the supreme intelligence, intelligent, who is Krishna. And that means to receive intelligence from him. Dadami buddhi yogam tam. Well, I'll work it all out with my intelligence, and then I will see what to do. But Krishna says, Yomameva samudho janati purusha. First before that, Tesham satata yuktanam bhajata priti purvakam dadami buddhi yogam tam yenamam upiyanti te. Tesham evanukam partam aham agyana jangtamaha nashyami atma bhavasto gyana dipena bhasvata. Krishna says, those who are engaged in my service with love constantly, I give them the intelligence by which they come to me, by which they become linked with me, being compassionate to them, I dwelling within their hearts, illuminate with the light of knowledge, I dispel the ignorance in their hearts. So, Brahmanda Brahmite, we can't know everything, understand everything, work out everything. We can take to bhakti with our intelligence, but it's not only intelligence. Bhakti is the feeling for Krishna that we have. Yes, I put my feeling here, my love here. Let me worship Krishna. Krishna is so attractive, and pleasing, beautiful, and kind. Has all the qualities by which we're attracted to him. So, if we are to make a philosophical analysis, then what is the prayojan? What is the ultimate principle of everything? The Mayavadis will say nothing. There is nothing. There's nothing to get excited about. Just the other day, one devotee came out to me and asked, "How is everything?" And I said to him, "Well, if you were a Buddhist, you would have asked, how's nothing?" So what is everything? What is everything? That we should understand. What is it? What's it all about? So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says that the highest principle is love. Prem prayoja. The highest principle is love. That's great. I mean, you can't put experiments and drops of chemicals into another solution. You can't work it all out empirically or by any other method, but at least intuitively, that's great, isn't it? The highest principle is love. Then why are we in this world at all? That was another question Prabhupada asked in this. How do we get in this samsara anyway? And Srila Prabhupada quoted, interestingly, he quoted in front of all these people, in Bengali, Krishna bahimokoya bhogavancha kare nikartasta mayatare japati adhar. By becoming inimical to Krishna, by rejecting that love. Love is the principle. So, makes good sense to me, at least. Anyway, let's not. Otherwise you can go on and on and on and on for millions of lifetimes speculating this way, that way, and never come to any conclusion. I mean, there's so many things. It makes so much sense. The first thing, the highest principle, and what's actually going on in this world is birth and death. That's a fact. We're suffering in this world. These are all very basic points that Srila Prabhupada pointed out time and time and time again. What is the cause of that suffering? Because of identification with the body. It's all very practical. It's not some hocus pocus made up stupid idea. So anyway, Hare Krishna. That's the conclusion of the lecture. Chant Hare Krishna and be happy. I'm not going to ask Tejas Prabhu to tell us more about Srila Prabhupada's practical intelligence, because I have to leave now. That's practically intelligent. Very good point. Thank you very much. And I know that if I ask you, then I might not leave till tomorrow morning.
Why not
till the end of June? Because there are so many practical things. I have to go. Hare Krishna! All glories to His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. Thank you very much, Tejas Prabhu, for coming here. Hare Krishna! Yeah. Sitting you can't do. And sticks can also be bent. That's also a point. Yeah. Actually, the full term should be Dandavat Pranam. But we say Dandavat for short. Otherwise, because yesterday Tejas Prabhu, he couldn't bow down, so he just said Dandavat. So I responded by saying Dandavat. This is like a stick, isn't it?
Standing Dandavat.
Standing Dandavat. It's just like a stick. So there you go. But it's not our Vaishnav culture to do like that. The real culture is to well, I don't want to publicize it. You're actually supposed to bow down. Huh? Will I take a question? 3.5 hours drive, huh? No. Practically, I won't. Hare Krishna.